Holding and instrument approaches. The good stuff, the fun stuff of instrument flying while we're all here, right? I love it. I don't know. To me, like what I was talking about before, I think it is just an exhilarating experience to be able to fly a true instrument approach and nail it. Nail it. So, all right, let's go through it. Contact and visual approaches. All right. Well, ones that we won't use too often. Have you ever done like a contact or a like an ASR approach, like a radar guided approach?
No. Not real.
Yeah, they're pretty
prevalent.
interesting. It's like flying in an old World War II movie. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Like, you know, turn right 10 degrees, stop. Descend 300 feet, stop. It's pretty interesting stuff. Yeah, and if you ever go to an airport that ever gets like joint military traffic with civilian traffic, they'll do one for you because they have to do it for currency purposes. Contact approach. So it's an alternative to a standard instrument approach. You can request it if there is 1 mile visibility and you're able to operate clear of clouds. Air traffic control will assign upon request if visibility is at least 1 mile. So that's just that for contact approach. Visual approach. ATC may assign the visual to an airport or authorize you to follow other airplanes for landing if accomplished in VFR. That one's pretty straightforward. So basically you're just on an IFR flight plan the whole time. You're on the ILS approach, but they could say, hey, you're cleared for the visual 9 left. So in order to do so, though, you must have the airport or preceding aircraft in sight. Air traffic control can assign the visual, but not a contact approach. That has to be requested. And then on a visual approach, radar service is terminated when instructed to contact the tower. So you're on approach control frequency. It says in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, turn left heading 230, maintain 2,200 until established. You're cleared for the ILS 9 left approach. You know, 2 miles from the final approach fix, you may contact tower radar service terminated. So an SDF or an LDA approach. Have you ever flown one of these?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you're familiar at least. All right, SDF, simple directional facility, has a course width of either 6 degrees or 12 degrees. An SDF approach may or not be aligned with the runway. Me personally, I've never seen an SDF approach that is aligned with the runway. SDFs do not have a glide slope, so we're just considering these like localizer type approaches.
It's kind of one of the definitions for an SDF. I mean, it's misalignment.
I know that's but yeah, whatever, you know, well, that's what the book says.
Yeah, no, and this is another one where it's like, oh, let's come up with an acronym for that people have to remember.
Of course, yeah, and the whole reason why these two names are out there because they're off axis, like an Aspen for their localizer. It's just like I just don't understand it. They make things more difficult than they need to be sometimes. But anyway, so an LDA, which you'll see more often than not, at least for the displaced one, as a localizer type direction aid, is useful as an accurate as a localizer. So between 3 degrees and 6 degrees course width. LDA is similar to an instrument landing system, but usually does not have a glide slope, only a localizer, and is not aligned with the runway, as we know. RVR. So RVR is a derived value that represents the horizontal distance the pilot can see down the runway from the approach end. While that's true, there also is RVR computers or indicators. If the RVR is inoperative, you can convert the RVR minimum ground visibility and use that as the visibility minimum for takeoffs and landings. Now, for Part 91 private operations, is there a minimum visibility requirement for takeoff?
No.
There's not, no. But basically the caveat to that says is that while there's no minimum visibility for departure, you basically should have enough visibility to take off and come back around and land at the airport using an approach to the lowest minimums.
Yeah, years ago flew with a guy and we left out and there was a very low cloud layer. You could almost call it fog. So we were below minimums at that airport. And that extended for about 100 miles, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But you got up to about 1,500 feet, penetrated 1,500 feet up, and it was wide open.
Mm-hmm. I love those kinds of days.
They're giving the guy chops all the time about, well, you realize, it's below minimum, sir. It's below minimum, sir. It's below minimum, sir. Yeah, well, I got a good engine. Let's go.
Yeah, it's just a safety thing. It's just a safety thing. I mean, it's while you could take off in 0-0, why are you doing that? So the normal ILS minimums is half statute miles of visibility or 2,400 feet RVR. Oh, also, another thing to note is if you have, I think it's a quarter mile visibility, you're able to tell that in air because generally the start of the approach lights to the runway end lights is about 1,200 feet. So that's how you could determine if the in-flight visibility is at least a quarter mile. When executing a missed approach prior to the missed approach point.
I thought that was more like either 2,400 or 1,000 feet or 3,000 feet. Unless you had the short version, and it's about 1,700 feet.
You know what? You very well may be correct. I was just always told that, like, at least for the standard approach lighting system, that it was 1,200 feet away from the runway beginning, though. Well, but I mean, I certainly can agree with you because I know I've seen ones that extend out beyond that.
Well, I'm thinking about the beginning of the lights to the decision bar. And we may be talking at cross purposes, the distance from the decision bar to the touchdown zone.
Sure.
Or to the end of the runway, I think that's probably more like a quarter mile.
All right. When executing a missed approach prior to the MAP, continue to the missed approach point at or above the minimum descent altitude or decision height before executing any turns. Why is that?
For obstruction clearance. If you have to maintain the direction of the runway until you, or whatever your approach direction is.
Correct.
Yeah,
you're more than welcome to climb unless there is a ceiling restriction before the missed approach point. But you cannot be turning, so you have to wait until you hit that point and then go, because that whole route provides obstruction clearance the whole time. So why are we going to go miss? Losing a visual reference during a circle to land, making a climbing turn towards your landing runway to become established on the missed approach course. Okay. The ILS specification. So the direction of deflection of the localizer and glide slope bar shows where the actual course is located.
Fly to the bars.
That's right. There you go. Fly to the needles or fly to the crosshairs. Or if you have a flight director, we put the notch in the crotch. That's what we call it. I don't know if you ever seen that with the little open-ended triangle and then a closed triangle.
Yeah, only in the Cheyenne. Nothing else I've flown had that fancy stuff in it. So.
Yeah, it really we have that in all the advanced airplanes, and you really become spoiled with that because it's kind of has a little bit of trend movement in it as well. So as soon as the notch starts moving, you just move the crotch, your triangle, into that position, and you'll stick right on the numbers. The normal decision height for an ILS Category 1 is 200 feet AGL. Pretty standard. The height of the glide slope center line at the middle marker. Not always the case. The ILS missed approach should be executed at the decision height on the glide slope, and it's the visual if visual references are not met. There's typos in there. So just for your own purposes, at least when you're flying and if you're by yourself, it's always good at least to be calling out the decision height even to yourself as you get closer to it. I don't know how you might be taught in the past or currently, but let's say your decision height is 200 feet. So when we get to 700 feet, at least for when you're by yourself, just say 500 feet to minimums. Now we're at 600 feet, 400 feet to minimums. And all you're doing is you're just keeping that in your head, so as you approach it, you're constantly aware of where that decision height is, because there are so many times where people just completely blow right through that decision height, forgetting what it was, and that's the end of that. And that's just a pilot trick, because if you're in a two-crew environment, we're usually starting out at 1,000 feet. 1,000 feet's a minimums, then 500, 400, 300, and then at some point runway in sight landing. The amount of deflection and distance from the localizer and glide slope for the ILS is presented in the chart. And we'll see the chart. Compass locator is used for the outer marker, OM, and middle marker of an ILS transmit 2-letter ID groups. And it's good to have just because I usually keep it on, at least on the low setting for when we're passing it, because it's just, if you're by yourself at least, because it's just another reminder as to your current position on the approach. The outer compass locator, the LOM, transmits the first 2-letter of the ID group. Do you recall what that kind of looks like on a chart?
Yeah, get that kind of lens shape.
Yeah, exactly. The middle compass locator, the LMM, transmits at least the last 2 letters of the ID group. If the outer marker and or the middle marker are not compass locators, there will not be a 2-letter ID transmission. An inner marker is identified by continual dots at the rate of 6 per second and flashing white marker beacon. If a DME is available on an ILS localizer approach, the DME TCAN channel will be indicated in the localizer frequency box on the instrument approach chart. So it's just good to know if you have DME on that approach or not. But if you have a backup GPS, then it kind of doesn't matter.
Well, and the only reason you actually need to know that number is if you're using a TACAN receiver.
Sure, but I mean, I'm talking for our purposes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, this is another one where you look at it and say, oh, okay, I'll memorize that for the test, thank you, and it has absolutely no use for me in the future.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if we were flying a C-130, then fine. All right, parallel dependent ILS approaches provide aircraft a minimum of 1.5-mile radar separation diagonally between successive aircraft on the adjacent localizer course. It's like also like a PAR approach. I don't know if you ever heard of those, like precision approach radar. And they have them at San Fran, but now because of the Asiana crash, they're not allowed to do those procedures if any Asian pilots are in the pattern.
Okay, now is that a joke or is it real?
You know what? I kind of wish that was a joke that just came into play. It's real. They just, after the Asiana crash, they said no Asian pilots. I don't know if they made it all foreign pilots, but I'm pretty sure it was just Asian pilots are not allowed to do the close-in parallel approaches. Because I guess they really want to watch these guys now and make sure and be focused on them. Okay, and precision runway monitoring, PRM, that's what I was just starting to talk about, is a radar system that has a high update rate and is able to monitor approaches closely spaced parallel runways. We actually have to do training for this in a simulator because there's certain communication procedures and operational procedures. Because when you're flying so close to each other, you got to know which way both of you guys are turning, who you're talking to, who you're listening to, because if you hear, somebody say go around and you're both there, you got to know who you're talking to.
Yeah.
So this kind of goes back to what I was talking about yesterday a little bit. No, actually, no, it doesn't have the 2 frequencies on there, does it? No, never mind. Yeah, just the depiction of the chart. So how an ILS instrument landing system works. Yay. So since you're an instrument student, I guess you'd be here, and then here, and then,
yeah,
and then there,
and there. And this is what I was saying. I flew some in the, just under the goggles recently, and it's amazing to me how much easier that GPS is to fly. Either that or the Skylane is more stable than I'm used to. I don't know which one it is, but
probably a little bit of combination of both.
Yeah.
Just aviation trivia for you. You know what kind of airplane this is?
I don't know. Looks like a Bonanza.
Yeah, that's what I would guess. Oh, there's your outer marker beacon. So that's usually your LOM. That's crossing through the LOM. And that could also be at a final approach fix as well.
Mm-hmm.
I know in Fort Lauderdale, our final approach fix is the Locator outer marker. All right. Do we need to continue through this?
No, we're good.
Okay. Unusable ILS components. So ILS components include localizer, glide slope, outer marker, middle marker, approach lights. So if more than one component is unusable, each minimum is raised to the highest minimum required by any single component that is inoperative. So, and it'll say it on the chart. Basically, if something's out, use these minimums. Also, another thing to note is if you are flying this approach and for whatever reason you see a flag on your OBX, you see the glide slope shoot off in one direction, you see the localizer do something else, even though everything else may be the same, you got to abandon the approach because you don't know whether it's your system or the actual ILS facility that something has gone wrong with.
Right.
Okay, so now for a PAR, compass locator or precision approach radar approach may be substituted for an inoperative outer marker or middle marker, assuming that they're able to give that to you or that you give a shit.
Or that they will bother, yes.
Yeah. An inoperative middle marker does not change the landing minimums and no substitution is required. I think it's just really for the outer marker since that is the final approach fix and that's where you're starting your descent from. When installed in ILS and specified in the approach procedure, DME may be used in lieu of the outer marker as well. Makes sense. So when the glide slope fails, the ILS reverts to a non-precision localizer approach. Okay, so this is what I was talking about. So there are pilots that will say, well, look, the glide slope failed. My localizer is still centered. You know, we're continuing the approach. Why create undue workload for ourselves and go around? Well, because we don't know what failed. And it would be lunacy to continue your approach if the whole system failed and you just don't know. So the localizer minimum descent altitude minimums will be used if the glide slope fails. If you are on the glide slope when the ILS fails and a VASI is in sight, you should continue the approach using the VASI and report the malfunction to ATC. But you want to be careful as to not going below minimums unless you've already crossed your visual descent point. That looks like Alaska. Find the approach. Oh, shit. All right, I'll give it about 5 seconds to load. If not, we'll move on. All right, moving on.
Yeah.
All right, so flying the approach. How are you with reading approach plates and really interpolating everything that's on there?
Yeah, pretty fair.
Okay.
Pretty fair. I mean, you know, it's not an automatic kind of a thing. I actually have to pull it out and look at it and study it.
Yeah.
So.
Until it becomes automatic, you know, you should be able to pick up an approach plate in the airplane. Let's say if they assign you a new approach and look at it and give yourself a quick brief so you know at least the frequency, the inbound course, the minimums, and then the basics of the missed approach procedure. And then maybe like the highest obstacle in the area. It should definitely become something that is like secondhand to you. So and part of it goes to the fact that when you're with your examiner or even by yourself, that you kind of want to get in the habit of having the same procedure for briefing the approach, whether it's out loud or in your head. You know, okay, this is the ILS 9 left approach in the Fort Lauderdale. Approach frequency is 110.10. Inbound course is 092 degrees. All right, our minimum altitude to intercept the glide slope on this approach will be 2,200 feet. We'll intercept the glide slope at 2,200, take it down to a decision height of 200 feet. Basically, like, that's your order. That's your flow.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, whatever the missed approach procedure may be. And you can tell I've flown that approach a number of times now that I have that thing memorized.
Yeah.
Rate of descent of the glide slope is dependent on your ground speed. As ground speed increases, the descent rate must also increase. So as ground speed decreases, the descent rate must decrease. So all proportional. If the airspeed is too fast initially with the glide slope and localizer centered, reduce the power. But that's a situation like I talked about yesterday where you should be completely configured on speed before you even start descending on the glide slope. When being vectored for an ILS approach and are about to fly through the localizer, maintain the last assigned heading and query the ATC rather than deviate from the clearance. Okay. Sometimes they're looking to fly you through the approach anyway. Continuing. So if wind shear changes from a headwind to a tailwind, the airspeed will drop, the nose will pitch down, and the vertical speed will increase. Initially increase the power to resume normal approach speed. I'd also fly a little bit higher on the glide slope as well, just because, let's say you are on IMC and there is a possibility of thunderstorms. It's possible you're encountering a microburst or a severe wind shear situation. As airspeed stabilizes, reduce the power to maintain the glide slope, increase the ground speed. So for the book, maintain the glide slope. Tendency is to go below the glide slope. I don't know why, but that's what the book says. That's what it is.
Well, again, that's one that you memorize for the test, because as a practical matter, what they're saying is the tendency is. That's only, if you're in visual contact and you're trying to fly with reference to the ground, yeah, you're gonna do that. There's a tendency to drop below the glide slope because you're trying to maintain your speed, your picture.
Exactly.
But if you're actually in it and you're reacting to the airspeed, you don't have a tendency to do anything. Now the airplane may tend to have effectively less lift or something, but that whole stuff is just something I have to memorize because it doesn't make any real sense.
Yeah, well, I agree with what you said. It's that's just one of those deals. Once again, that what the book says kind of overrides common practice or common sense. Continuing, so the tailwind to a headwind or an even calm, decrease the power initially and then increase once you are through the shear to maintain the slope. So this is still continuing and just stuff that you have to just try to remember.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those things when you're flying the airplane, it's just kind of just obvious stuff. The tendency is to go above the glide slope in this situation. And then in this situation, from the tailwind to the headwind, I can understand how the aircraft can actually want to do that just because now you're getting increased wind over the wings. So a little increased lift.
Well, okay, yeah.
Do you want me to go back?
No, you're right.
Okay.
I concur.
So for tracking the localizer, you should have the drift correction before reaching the outer marker. Sure. But also as the previous chapter mentioned, we're talking about winds, surface friction, and then winds at one altitude and winds at another altitude can be completely different. So while you're up at 2,200 feet correcting for a 10-knot quartering headwind, as we get a little bit lower, maybe around 500 feet, 400 feet, now it's shifting. And then I think good practice too, I don't know if you do this now with your instructor or will, but once you're flying the approach, I set my heading bug to my desired wind correction angle. So as long as I keep my little notch around the heading bug, I know that I'll probably be keeping my course down the center line of the localizer. Okay. It's just a nice reference to help yourself out.
Yeah.
So this way you're not kind of chasing the localizer all over the place. All right, so complete the approach with a heading corrections no greater than 2 degrees. So definitely very, very shallow turns. And this way, let's say you set the bug to 10 degrees off to your right, and you find that you're still getting pushed to the left. Make it 15 degrees, and then correct back to there and see what happens. And it's just always those small movements, whereas a lot of people, they'll correct 25 degrees, and all of a sudden, the localizer's now moving in the other direction, and then they're shooting back another 20 degrees, and the whole time they're pretty much just making S-turns across the localizer.
You would call it flying a snake.
Yeah. Air traffic control provides headings when to descend to the minimum descent altitude, airplane position, each mile and final, and arrival at the missed approach point. That's just for an airport surveillance approach, which is rare. May be used at airports with civil instrument approach minimums. ATC radar, when approved for the approach control, may be used for course guidance. That's kind of like, turn left, stop, turn right, stop. Forgot what it was. There's some old World War II movie with, that doesn't matter. No gyro approaches. Turns are made at standard rate. And that should be the norm anyway for any type of instrument flying. After handoff to the final approach controller, turns are at half standard rate. Sidestep approaches. These are fun. You ever done one of these?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, these are pretty straightforward, but got to talk about them. All right, so we're cleared to the approach to runway. You're cleared ILS 9 left, sidestep runway 9 right. Approach to the runway until you see a parallel runway, and then when able, sidestep to that parallel runway. Usually good practice to announce when you're making the sidestep. It's used when a pilot executes an approach serving one or two or more parallel runways separated by 1,200 feet or less, and then diverts to the parallel runway. Execute the sidestep as soon as possible after the runway or environment is in sight. Sometimes they'll tell you, though, that, hey, execute your sidestep on a 5-mile final. Because, once again, like going back to San Francisco or places like that, even though it could very well be visual conditions, but because of just arrival traffic and how they want to separate everybody, they still want you flying that approach then with the sidestep. Timed approach from a holding fix. Lovely. This is one in which you are cleared to leave the final approach fix or out of marker at a specified future time. So this kind of goes back to applying to comm failure when we're at the hold. When executing from a holding fix at the outer marker, adjust the holding pattern to leave the final approach fix inbound at the assigned time. What is the assigned time?
Okay, well, that's the further clearance time, or the time they tell me to.
Well,
I mean, it's either very obvious or I'm not understanding your question.
Well, okay, yeah, actually it's a little bit of a I should have elaborated a little more, because there's two different times. You have the EFC time, but then there was like a designated like time of arrival basically, and really the time of arrival, that's, you know, if they say that it's 30 minutes after you got into the hold, or your EFC, or the time was 30 minutes after the EFC, you're not going to continue dicking around flying the hold. So basically, it's, even though the book says this, once you get the EFC, you're from the hold. You're departing the hold and proceeding to the outer marker for the approach. And if you have comm failure already, they expect you to be leaving the EFC at that time and proceeding to the approach.
Mm-hmm.
So while it says, adjust the holding pattern to leave the final approach fix inbound at the assigned time, well, I'd be more concerned with leaving the hold at the EFC. All right, so time to approach from a holding fix. Executed under the following conditions. The control tower in operation at the airport where the approach is conducted. Direct communication is maintained between the pilot and approach or center until pilot is instructed to contact tower. And if more than one missed approach procedure is available, none may require a course reversal, and you must not take you back to the final approach fix. So let me reread that one. Oh, so basically you shouldn't be. Help me out on this one, maybe. Let's talk about this one here. Is it saying that you should not be planning an approach to an airport that has a course reversal for the approach?
No, I think what they're saying is that if you've got if there's more, okay, you're not going to use the timed approach from the holding fix if you've got a missed approach procedure that requires a course reversal. So if my missed approach point is the initial approach fix, or if it would interfere with the initial approach fix, or it would put me back in the path of incoming aircraft using the initial approach fix.
Got it. Yeah, basically you're just flying the straight in, not to fly the circle because of the conflict.
Right. So then I can't use the timed approach. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. I don't know why would we want to be screwing around with a course reversal anyway when you have the ability to fly the straight in. Timed approach from a holding fix continuing, so it's executed under the following conditions. If only one missed approach procedure is available, course reversal is not required, but ceiling and visibility must be greater than the highest circling minimum for the instrument approach procedure. And where would we find the highest circling minimum?
in the thing there down at the bottom of the approach plate for the circling approach.
Good. Okay. And then how do you determine whether you're category A, B, C, or D?
Speed.
Speed. Good. But is it the speed that you're max capable of flying at? Is it your approach speed? Well, how is that kind of determined?
It's the usual approach speed.
Okay.
And they've got it like 90, 120, and so forth.
Yep. So when cleared for the approach, the pilot should not execute a procedure turn. So this is kind of what we were talking about here. So hit the fix, go in, inbound this way. So instead of flying here, flying the hold, coming back around and shooting the approach, they just want you flying, doing the straight-in approach. So this keeps the aircraft within the specified airspace awaiting further clearance from ATC. Oh, now this is talking about the hold. And a racetrack shape based on a fix that is a radial navigation facility. So you're going to hold either on a VOR, an ADF, or another navi. And you could hold on an intersection, whether you're triangulating it between 2 points or it's just a fixed GPS RNAV position. So navigate bearings, radials, or a DME fix. So they could say hold on the 090 degree radial on the 15 DME from snow VOR. So you know at least that your fixed position is 15 nautical miles away from the VOR. That's kind of rare. Usually you're holding over a defined fix, but it could happen. Also, another thing to point out is that there's timed holds and there's distance holds. Some dictate, like 1 minute legs or 2 minute legs, or some dictate 5 mile legs. But you have the ability when you're talking to air traffic control to request one or the other. And to me, the easiest way, especially if you have any kind of GPS in the aircraft, is a distance hold. You're going to still have to learn how to do your timed holds. But at least if you know that, hey, Denver approach, we're requesting 4 mile legs over the snow VOR. This way you don't have to worry about what the wind is doing. You fly outbound for 4 miles, now you fly inbound for 4 miles. You don't have to figure out, oh, we have to extend the time, shorten the time. Just makes your workload a little bit easier. Do you understand what I was saying?
Yeah, no.
Okay. Holding patterns
it's a simple way to keep your patterns from being oobleegog shaped.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're going to have to still deal with crosswind correction,
Right.
but at least now you're just mitigating the chances of screwing up. Because if you're doing a timed hold, not only do you have to focus on, oh, okay, we've flown outbound for a minute, but my inbound leg was now 50 seconds, so now my next outbound leg has to be a minute 10, but you're still focusing on your crosswind correction. So it's just a lot going on there. Whereas if you know you have 4 mile legs, let's say, all you're worrying about is how your crosswind correction is.
Right.
So the holding patterns consist of the following components. Note that the fix is always at the end of the inbound leg. So do you remember, or have you gone over any of like the time, turn, twist, throttle, talk, track stuff?
Yeah, some of these mnemonics have dropped out of my brain. I have to work on them some more.
Yeah, and it's one of those, again, that you really should be very comfortable with. One, the proper entry of a holding procedure, and two, what knobs and buttons and things you're pressing and doing once you're in the hold, because it does become kind of quite confusing, and not having a good spatial awareness or orientation could really throw you off. I fly with this one woman. She flies like once a month for instrument training, and once a month certainly is not enough. But I can't tell you how many times I have to like remind her to either like turn the heading to the inbound course, or are we turning left this time? Are we turning right? She's all over the place. All right, so standard holding patterns are right turns unless otherwise specified. Obviously, if it's not standard, it would be non-standard to the left. I think that kind of goes without saying. ATC will specify in the holding clearance if it's left turns. So it says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold east of the snow VOR on the 090 degree radial. Standard turns, or they may say left turns. Timing of the outbound leg begins over or beam the fix, whichever occurs later. So let's say we're flying to the snow VOR. You may even want to like maybe draw this out yourself. But if we're flying inbound to the snow VOR, and that's our inbound leg, so we're flying on a 270 degree heading towards the VOR. We now hit it, and we now have to start making a right turn to go start our outbound racetrack. But since we are hit once, we can't start our turn to the outbound until we get the to from swing. So now is when we do our T's. So we got to do our turn. So now we're turning around to 090, assuming the calm weather. And we start our time. When would we start our time for the outbound leg?
When you come back a beam after you've essentially completed your
so
turn.
Since we're not lined up on a course line, so we have no navigational help except for just outbound heading. How do we determine once we're abeam the VOR?
That's a good question.
Okay, so since we can't start our turn prior to hitting the VOR, we know when we cross the VOR because we're going to get the to from swing, right?
Right.
All right, so now we're making a right turn.
So it should reverse again when you pass.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
because even though you're not lined up, your OBS is still, or your HSI, depending on what you have, is still going to recognize that you're passing from one side of the VOR to the other. Because really, if you think about it, even though I'm hitting the fix and starting an immediate turn, you're still flying kind of beyond the VOR. Right? So now we're kind of crossing the VOR again. So now we're on a 090 degree heading outbound. We've gotten our to from flip. So now we start our time, and we're going to fly outbound for 1 minute on a 090 heading. Now, once that 1 minute expires or is about to expire, we now start our right turn to re-intercept our course line for 270 inbound to the VOR. When do we start timing for the inbound?
When we're established on the inbound leg.
Established. Now, let's say for whatever reason, though, that the wind was out of the north, so you were scrunching your racetrack together. So when you were making that right turn back towards the inbound leg, you flew through your course. So for that, at that point, we've already started moving inbound, but we've flown through the course. So as soon as you hit that point, you got to start your time, because even though you're not completely lined up, you're now still moving inbound towards the fix.
Okay, so when I use the word establish, I'm thinking in terms of, okay, I'm headed back. I'm through with my turn. I'm headed back. Is what I'm really saying, not established in the sense of actually aligned on the course.
Okay, well, both would be true, but yes, you are correct in what you're saying. Because our whole goal is to figure out our position relative to what the wind is doing. So we were talking about a zero wind situation on the outbound, but I started to mention, okay, if you're getting pushed into it. So let's just say for whatever reason, all right, well, let me continue before I jump ahead. So now we're inbound, and it now takes us 50 seconds from the time you started the clock established to crossing the snow VOR. It took us 50 seconds. How long should our next outbound leg be?
Well, you want to add the 10 seconds that you've lost, so you're going to come back around and be outbound 1:10.
Good. Okay. Now, another thing to note as well is that let's say we were let's say we were getting pushed towards the racetrack. So we knew that we blew through our approach course on the first turn in. So now we know that instead of flying a 090 heading outbound, we should maybe fly, and it's really dependent on what the wind is, but let's just say it's like a 10-knot quarterly wind. You may want to try to fly a 080 heading for your outbound.
Right. Yeah.
So we fly. So now it's trial and error. There's no right or wrong answer to it. You could try to think about a mathematical formula, but you're going to drive yourself crazy. So now we're flying 080 outbound. We'll fly it for 1:10, and now we make our right turn. And if everything works out hunky-dory, with a standard rate turn or close to standard rate turn, you should be rolling wings level as you're getting established inbound, lined up on your inbound course. Right? Do you want me to kind of go over that again?
Yep.
I know it makes a hell of a lot more sense when you're actually flying the airplane.
Yeah. Well, and again, in our modern lives with the GPS and the panel, if it's a
I know, but
if it's a standard holding pattern, you just fly the damn chart. But
no, it's true, but you have to have. It comes more down to, because let's say they give you an intersection hold, okay?
Right.
You have to understand your position or your relative awareness to that intersection, because if there's not a defined line that you could see drawn out from somewhere, it may get confusing. And what I mean by that is that you have to know what side of the fix you're properly holding on. You have to know if you're staying in the safe side of the turn, if you're going left or if you're going right. Because if you don't know, depending on your holding entry, because let's say the hold entry is not a direct entry where you just hit the fix and make a right turn. If it's, let's say you have to make a teardrop entry and come back around, a lot of people screw that up and will end up making the turn in the wrong direction. And if you're in the mountains, doing a hold in the mountains, that turn in the wrong direction could get you smack dab into a hillside.
Yeah.
All right, so timing of the outbound leg begins over a beam to fix, whichever occurs later. We just discussed that. If the beam position cannot be determined, start timing when the turn outbound is complete. Well, I can't really think of a situation where it can't be determined. If you, for whatever reason, you just get confused, I can understand that, but you really should have an idea of where your crossing should be. Even if you're using triangulated positions off of VOR, like if you're using two VORs to establish an intersection, there still is going to be a swing in one direction or the other. It may not be immediate. Like let's say it's the OBS where it's really like a slow swing to center, and then it hits the center and it stays on the center for about 10 seconds, 5-10 seconds, and then swings through. That's probably a situation where you know, like, okay, as soon as it's gone there, I realize that I'm about to cross through my fix. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yep.
Okay. And an NDB, the timing for an outbound leg should be when a beam to fix. That will be pretty obvious by the swing of the needle. Hold and pattern. Indicated airspeed for all aircraft. So these are doesn't matter what kind of airplane you're flying, these are maximum regulated speed. So minimum holding altitude through 6,000 feet, you should be at no more than 200 knots. Also, it helps you to never fly. You want to make sure, that kind of goes back really quick before I get on another tangent, is that when you're flying these holds, you don't want to be at full power. You don't even want to be at cruise power. You want to be somewhere around like maneuvering speed, because it just makes it a hell of a lot easier for you to be flying these holds. All right, so your maximum speed from minimum holding height to 6,000 feet is 200 knots. 6,001 feet to 14,000, you have a max speed of 230 knots. And then from 14,000 feet, 1401 and above, maximum holding speed of 265 knots. That's fast. You really don't want to be flying faster than that anyway. How are you with these?
Hate them.
Hate them. Okay.
Well, I mean, see, this is another one that, as a practical matter, you memorize it for the test, but again, in real life, it's like, and I've talked to one of the instructors I fly with is an ex-controller, and his attitude toward it is, look, hey, as long as you're on the safe side, I really don't care what your ground pattern looks like. Just stay on the safe side of the the protected airspace.
That is true, because your altitude is cleared for you in a hold. There may be people 2,000 feet below you, 2,000 feet above you, all stacked up, especially like in the New York area, or even over Denver in the middle of winter. That happens, but that is true, and there is no right or wrong answer except for on your check ride.
Yeah, well, check ride and the written test, yeah.
Yeah, and when I took my simulator ride to go fly for US Air Express, they didn't make us fly the hold entry. I'm sorry, they didn't make us fly the hold, but they made us identify the hold entry and the initial turn in the hold. And the reason why is that while you can really do whatever the hell you want, it just makes things a hell of a lot easier and reduces the workload. Everybody kind of learns this their own way. I think this is a great way of doing it, to kind of figure out direct parallel and teardrop. And I think you should kind of commit this diagram to memory, because how I do it on an instrument check ride, and even for the instrument written, and this helps me a lot, and this is what I tell students, and I find them to help them a lot, is draw the little triangle that you see here in the middle, just on a piece of paper. And then draw your airplane like a little stick figure of an airplane relative to your position of the hold. And that right away should give you an idea, as long as you have a general idea of what needs to be done on the teardrop, parallel, or direct. By drawing your airplane's relative position, it gives you an immediate idea of your situational awareness. Whereas if you're like trying to turn your OBS to figure out your direct entry, you're heading direct to the fix. Because let's say like if I'm using this and they're telling you to hold on the east side of the VOR or this intersection with right turns. And we're down here and we're flying north. We're on a 360 heading flying north right now. Well, how am I going to navigate to this VOR?
Well,
I'm going to tune the VOR. I'm going to fly direct to, right?
Right. Yeah.
All right. So but now you have to think like in your head while you're flying. Okay, I'm 360, but now I'm turning to maybe a 030 heading. Okay, so 030, but my inbound course, it's too much stuff. So what I do is I draw the line, I draw the triangle. They tell me I'm holding east of the VOR, so now I draw this on a piece of paper. So now I have my stick figure airplane, and I draw this on a piece of paper, forgetting the circle and all that other crap. It gives you, to me at least, an immediate idea of your relative position to the hold, and at least you can tell yourself right away, for me, what is going to be the easiest way to enter the hold. Does that kind of make sense to you, what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
So for your instrument check ride, for sure, I think you'd be remiss in not having a knee board and a little piece of paper. So when you're
you can draw a picture on,
yeah, so as soon as your examiner, and I always had the triangle, or a couple of triangles written out before, because if they give you a couple of them, at least you're not confusing yourself, erasing and drawing over it. But I always had the triangle written out, and as soon as they gave me the hold, so hold northeast, hold southwest, hold south, hold north, all I had to do was really quickly draw my racetrack around the fix, my triangle, and immediately I would have an idea as to my relative position to the hold entry.
Mm-hmm.
So, and well, just to continue, before I continue on, a teardrop and a parallel entry, they're kind of similar in the sense that you're still kind of making like a big course reversal. So if you ever get in a situation where it's like you need to do a parallel entry, I've always found, and this is just anecdotal from my side, that it's just kind of probably easier just to make a teardrop entry. So your entry to the holding pattern should be based on one of the three procedures illustrated here. Illustrated is a standard pattern, same concept for non-standard. So for the parallel procedure, we're going to hit the fix. So let's just say we're coming in from the northwest. We're flying down. We're going to hit the fix. And then we're going to fly parallel to the outbound leg. So what we need to do is we need to set, let's just say this was, if we're tuning our OBS to 270 inbound, our outbound radial is what?
090.
090. So we're flying direct to the VOR. We're just going to call this the VOR for right now. So let's just say my OBS was lined up on, this was like 150 heading. So we're flying direct to the VOR. Now we're realizing we're about to just hit the VOR. So now we're going to turn to what heading?
090.
090. Time.
Yeah.
We're going to start our time outbound for 1 minute.
So turn time, yeah.
And then we're going to twist. We're going to twist our OBS to what?
270.
270, correct. Because that'll be your inbound. And then throttle, which is just the BS of just, hey, make sure that you're not hauling ass, you're not going too slow, and track. So right now, now we're flying our outbound on our parallel entry for 1 minute. Now 1 minute elapses. Now we just start a left turn, and it's more than standard rate. You kind of have to be a little more aggressive with it, because if we start a standard rate turn, you're coming around, and by the time you make it on your course line, you're already on top of the fifth. So it has to be, this is why I kind of don't like parallel entries, because you have to make it more of an aggressive turn, because you want to try to re-intercept this course line, this 270 inbound, with enough time to kind of get yourself established and situated. But then once you're there, you're golden, because you don't ever have to twist the OBS anymore. You just leave it on 270, and all you got to worry about is just kind of flying that racetrack. So a teardrop procedure. And I know it's a lot, at least for just going over it here. I mean, you got to just write it out and go over it over and over again till it's just committed to memory. At this point, like when I draw it out, and like when I'm doing this in real life, for the once in a blue moon you have to do a hold, It just automatically is in my head, okay, this is a teardrop entry. It just has to become just second nature. Teardrop procedure, proceed on the outbound track of a 30 degrees or less to the holding course. So if this is 270, I'm sorry, so if we know our outbound is 090, what heading should this be once we hit the fix?
About 060.
About 060, and that's up to you. Some people like doing a 45 degree. I don't mind in between. It really just depends what the weather's doing. If you know that you have no mountains on either side and you really want to take time to help get yourself established, yeah, make it like a 40 degree outbound. So we're flying here for a minute. A minute elapses. We now start a nice gradual right-hand turn until we re-intercept our inbound course. And to me, that's why I think between the parallel and the teardrop, that a teardrop is just a hell of a lot easier because it's just a less aggressive maneuver.
Well, not only that, but you're always turning in the same direction as your hold. You're not
Yes, sir.
Turning the quote wrong direction to establish yourself.
And that's where people kind of screw themselves up, that they may turn to the outside of the safety area. And then a direct procedure doesn't get much easier than that. Fly direct to the fix, make your right turn, and go. And then what's nice with the newer GPSs like the Garmin 430, 530, G1000s, 3000s, they actually tell you what side or like how you're going to enter the hold. It's pretty incredible. So as you get closer to it, it flashes on the bottom of the screen, hold direct, hold teardrop, hold parallel. So for the knowledge test, draw a holding pattern complete with the fix and inbound leg. So through the fix, draw the 70-degree angle intersecting the outbound leg at 1/3 of the outbound leg length. You can do this. That's fine. To draw this line right here, if that helps you denote between direct teardrop and parallel. But just based on what it looks like, just if you eliminate these colored circles, it should be pretty straightforward and common sense as to which way you should be entering the hole. Oh, another thing I should point out, which is kind of helpful, is that I sometimes draw a little, oh, you know what, I can do it right here.